Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 news, and almost 4 hours after the end of qualifying for the Monza Grand Prix, the FIA have finally confirmed what the grid is going to look like for tomorrow. Verstappen is P7 after all. Have the FIA done this just because it's going to make a better race tomorrow? Have they followed the procedures properly? There's so many questions going around about this and they haven't really fully explained it. Very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you are new as always. So Gasly is like, what's even going on? Where am I in tomorrow's race? What position am I in? It would be nice to know. This, of course, is the penalties that go down. Tsunoda, Hamilton, all these penalties. To me, it makes sense probably to apply the ones that are the worst penalties first, send the guys to the back of the grid first that are going to be back there, then run through the rest of the penalties towards the 5th-place penalty at the front. Now, there is an argument to do it the other way around, or there is an argument to do it in favour of the driver that was highest up in qualification, and apparently that used to be the case and has now changed, or, it's honestly an absolute mess, to be perfectly honest. Also, you would have thought qualification finishes, right? You put these data points into an algorithm and it tells you the grid within about half a second and you can just publish it. It's taken 4 hours for them to figure it out. So this was how qualifying worked. Of course, this is the key point for tomorrow's race. Where Perez starts and all this, obviously it matters to a certain extent, but it's Verstappen's starting position that is key. If he was started P4, I think he's still favourite for this race. Starting P7, you've probably got to say Leclerc is favourite, starting from pole with Verstappen P7 around a circuit like Monza. You guys might disagree. Let me know in the comments section below. So it was Leclerc, Verstappen. These were the results in qualifying, and then for Verstappen could have gone down to P7, but then with Sainz, Perez, Hamilton getting demoted further than Verstappen did, then Verstappen would be back up to P4, which is one way of doing it. I think it makes more sense personally to kind of do, the penalties to the back of the grid first, then maybe refresh and do the rest. Maybe I'm just biased in terms of what's going to make for a more exciting race tomorrow, but the fact that Verstappen could have been P2 and then ends up P4 after a 5th-place penalty makes me think, well, that's a bit strange, right? It doesn't seem right necessarily. So that maybe is what the FIA have decided, but apparently the regulation said the driver with the higher classification from qualifying has preference. So as in, you apply Verstappen's one first, goes to P7, then back up to P4 after everything else is applied. So that was one of the things that was said. Then there were other indications coming out that actually, no, those guidelines have now been adjusted after Charlie Whiting's death, and therefore now Verstappen will indeed be P7. So it's honestly so confusing. None of the drivers knew, none of the, even teams knew. The FIA probably didn't know, and they were looking through every single rule in the book to try and figure this one out. Now, and in the end, maybe what they've done is they've kind of applied those penalties, frozen the grid, refreshed it, and then done it again. But it depends on the order in which you do that determines what the result is of the grid at the end of the day. To me, I think what they've come up with probably makes the most sense at the end of the day, but they need some serious clarification on this to make sure it's easier in the future. If you guys follow my esports stuff, you'll probably know a name called Red Eye, and he actually comes up with his provisional grid looking through the rules as he saw them in the guidelines, and probably the FIA were doing the same thing. This actually aligned with what motorsport.com had on their website, and it also aligns with what Eric Van Haren was hearing, that indeed Verstappen would be P7, Nick de Vries P8 with an all-Dutch 4th row, which, if Nick de Vries takes out Verstappen turn 1, he's probably going to have his citizenship revoked, but that's what's going down tomorrow. So this is the provisional grid that the FIA have just come out with, and this is what it looks like. Leclerc P1, Russell P2, Norris P3. That was a guarantee. Back of the grid, Tsunoda, Hamilton, Sainz, Schumacher, Magnussen, Bottas, Ocon, that was all guaranteed. From the rest of the grid was honestly nobody knew what was going on. Turns out Daniel Riccardo is P4, Gasly's P5, Alonso ends up 6th, and then Verstappen 7th. So what they must have done here is applied the penalties for the guys at the back first, then done the 15th-place ones, then done the 10th-place ones to put Perez, who ended up, 13th or whatever, because I think he was 10th if you did it the other way around. So, obviously it makes a big difference, but I think, honestly, it kind of makes sense to have the guys at the front actually take some reasonable penalties, they should be penalised to some degree. Otherwise, it's kind of incentivizing drivers at the front of the grid, taking, shorter penalties, 5-place penalties, on weekends where other drivers are also taking them, and then, not even having to really serve a 5-place penalty. So, I don't know. I personally think this makes marginally more sense, but I'd still love some clarification on exactly what they've decided for what reasons. They actually list the penalties down here, and I'm not exactly sure if that's the order in which they've been applied, because there was someone else saying that the way they applied them is in the order where they were notified to the FIA. So if Hamilton whatever said he was going to take a new engine first, then they enact that first, and then and then Verstappen's one came towards the end, so that kind of gets done last. I don't really know. It's still kind of unclear, but the fact of the matter is this is the grid for tomorrow. Verstappen ends up P7, which is a big deal, of course, for tomorrow's race. If he was P4, gets Norris off the line, Russell's in a tractor, get him relatively quickly, and then he's on Leclerc's gearbox within 5 or 6 laps. From P7, maybe he's on Leclerc's gearbox within 10 laps, right? But it could be a very different story, and I would honestly expect it to be. Alonso is not going to go down without a fight. Now, Verstappen is still confident that he can win this race tomorrow. Understandably, I still honestly think even from P7, it's kind of like a 50-50 race tomorrow. But I think it does make things more interesting than if he was P4, where it seemed like a foregone conclusion, but maybe not guaranteed. Because actually, the straight line speed advantage that the Red Bulls have enjoyed is not the case here. They have the same speed car with DRS open. With DRS closed, the Ferrari is quicker because they're running much less rear wing, whereas, Red Bulls are running actually pretty high rear wing. They're running a pretty big barn door on the back of their car. With DRS open, that isn't so much of an issue, but with DRS closed, it actually slows them down a lot. I saw an interesting analysis Corinne Chandok was doing between the pole lap of Charles Leclerc and Max Verstappen, and the two cars were dead level coming out of the Ascari chicane. It was the run down into the parabolica with no DRS, round the parabolica and through to the finish line, no DRS, where Leclerc gained about 1.5 or 10th of a second. So that was the difference in the entire lap, pretty much. And down the straight, it was the same speed, but it was really that no DRS straight where Verstappen was actually losing a fair bit of time. They're running more downforce, they're quicker in Sector 2 than the Ferraris are. Interesting, in fairness, they decided not to kind of absolutely maximize their straight line speed to make them a rocket ship in a straight line like they were in Spa. They've gone for a different route aimed at preserving their tyres. This is where they think the key advantage will be, that they might have similar race pace, maybe better race pace in terms of like just average lap time compared to Ferrari, but in the long runs, they expect their tyres to hold up way better. The idea is if you have more downforce, the tyres have to do kind of less work holding onto the track. They get a bit more help from the downforce. They slide around less under the car, and therefore they degrade less, right? When you're rubbing on the surface, they get torn apart effectively. When you've got more downforce, that happens to a lesser degree. Therefore, Verstappen, the idea might be he goes from P7, let's say he gets to P2 within about 10 laps, but it's Leclerc who's about 10 seconds up the road. He might be able to close in that time based on the fall off that Leclerc might have compared to Verstappen. And let's say Leclerc has to bit earlier than Verstappen, then Max can go longer, and then by the time that he comes out again behind Leclerc in the second stint of the race, probably a one-stop around Monza because the tyres don't really mind you driving in a straight line. It's the corners that they don't like so much, so probably a one-stop is on the cards for tomorrow. Then at the end of the Grand Prix, the final 10 laps or so, that's where Red Bull are expecting to have the tyre advantage for Verstappen to push for the victory and overtake Leclerc. I think he'll be close, or he'll be there or thereabouts, but P7 instead of P4 makes a big difference into how much time he might lose on the opening few laps of the race. That might affect whether he can actually catch Leclerc at the end if his tyres indeed are better as they expect them to be. That's the strategy part of this race tomorrow. Will it work out like that? Honestly, who knows? But just to kind of clarify that, these were the top speeds of both cars in the speed traps today. The same for Red Bull and Ferrari, 343. Williams the fastest, right? They just have no idea how to generate downforce, but they also maximize their strength, which of course is fair enough. 346 in a straight line. But with no DRS, the Ferrari is quicker, right? As I just mentioned. And that's kind of shown with this graphic where, as you can see, this is the percentage of the lap where the drivers are full throttle. You can see the Williams just has no downforce, so they really can't go full throttle that early, like after corners, whereas the Red Bull with more downforce can go on the throttle much earlier. So this is the advantage that Red Bull has tomorrow with effectively a higher downforce set up in the car. Will it be enough to win? Probably from P4, maybe not from P7. Very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.